Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're going way back to ancient Greece in the 6th century BCE.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Anaximander, a philosopher with some really groundbreaking ideas about the universe. I mean, stuff that we're still thinking about today.
Absolutely.
Like, one of his big ideas was something called the apeiron.
Yeah,
Sounds a little intimidating, right?
it does. A little bit. But it's a really fascinating concept when you get into it. I mean, just imagine, trying to figure out what the universe is made of.
Right.
Like, where did it all come from? I mean, these are the questions that Anaximander and, his fellow pre-Socratic philosophers were really struggling with.
Yeah, so these were like the original philosophers.
Yeah, the OGs.
Yeah.
And they were really trying to move beyond, just relying on mythology, and they're really trying to use reason and observation.
Right. Like instead of saying, oh, the world's on the back of a giant turtle, they were really like looking for more concrete explanations.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's impressive for the time, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And, Anaximander's answer to that, the apeiron, was particularly revolutionary. So, rather than pointing to one of these specific elements like water or fire as the foundation of everything, he proposed the apeiron, which translates to, well, there's a couple different ways to translate it, unlimited or indefinite.
Okay, so what does that actually mean? Like how do we understand that?
Yeah, so you have to think of it as the source of everything, the primordial stuff that everything comes from. But it's not a substance itself.
Oh, interesting.
It's the potential for all substances. So if you think about it like the clay a potter uses, it can be molded into any shape. It can become a pot or a plate or a figurine, but the clay itself isn't any one thing in particular.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, I think.
Yeah.
So it's like the cosmic building block, right?
Yeah.
But how did Anaximander, like what led him to that kind of conclusion?
Well, he was looking at the world around him and he was seeing all this change, right?
Yeah.
You've got cycles of life and death. You've got the seasons changing. You've got the heavens moving. It all pointed to this dynamic universe.
Okay.
And the apeiron was his way of explaining where does everything come from and where does it go back to?
So he wasn't seeing a world that was static and unchanging. He was seeing this constantly kind of evolving, swirling, potential.
Absolutely, yeah. And that idea of a universe in constant flux, it was a radical idea.
Yeah, I bet.
For its time.
Yeah.
Because it really challenged that prevailing notion of a fixed and unchanging world order.
Right, right. It's almost like he's anticipating some of the ideas that we have in modern physics, right? Like the conservation of energy. Like things aren't created or destroyed, they're just transformed.
Yeah. It's a fascinating parallel. And it also kind of leads into another one of his key ideas, which is this idea of cosmic justice.
Okay. Tell me more about that. What is cosmic justice in Anaximander's world?
Well, he believed that as things kind of emerge from the apeiron, they're, in a sense, borrowing from it.
Right.
They're taking something from this unlimited source.
Okay.
And eventually they have to pay back that debt by dissolving back into the apeiron.
Interesting.
So there's this balancing act, this kind of cosmic equilibrium.
So it's not just things coming into being and fading away, but there's almost a sense of order to it, like a system of accountability.
Exactly. There's this idea that the universe has its own kind of inherent justice. And that idea had a huge impact.
Right.
It actually influenced ancient legal systems all the way up to modern day thinking about the environment and things like that. It reminds us that actions have consequences.
Yeah.
And we are ultimately accountable to the larger order of the cosmos.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea. That we're all interconnected, we're all sort of bound by this cosmic law. I mean, it makes you think about your place in the grand scheme of things, doesn't it?
It does. And what's even more impressive is that Anaximander, he arrived at these ideas by observing the world around him and just using reason to try to understand the universe on its own terms.
Now, you mentioned that Anaximander and his contemporaries were really moving away from relying on mythology to explain the world. But did their ideas completely replace those older ways of thinking? Or was it more of a gradual shift?
Yeah, it was definitely more of a gradual shift. You can think of it as a kind of a dialogue between the old and the new.
Okay.
So while they were breaking new ground with their rational approach, they were also drawing upon the existing knowledge and traditions that they had inherited.
Right. So they weren't completely rejecting the past. They were kind of reinterpreting it and expanding on it through this lens of reason.
Exactly. It's a testament to how complex intellectual history is. New ideas emerge, but they emerge in conversation with the old, building upon transforming what came before. And you can really see this in another one of Anaximander's groundbreaking contributions, and that is his work as a cartographer.
Okay, so we've got the Apeiron, we've got this unlimited source of everything, constantly in motion and changing. But how does map making fit into all of this?
Well, remember, Anaximander was trying to understand the world around him. He was trying to grasp not just like the nature of the cosmos, but also the nature of our place in it.
Okay.
And one of the ways he did that was by creating a map of the world, the first one of its kind.
Wow, so we're going from the cosmic to the concrete here.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about this map?
Well, picture this, a time before Google Maps, before satellites, before anyone really had a clear picture of what the world looked like beyond their immediate surroundings. And Anaximander, using the knowledge that was available at the time, he actually constructed this map.
That's incredible.
That was revolutionary for its time.
So what did it look like? Was it anything like the maps we have today?
Well, it was certainly different than what we're used to looking at today. So imagine this, a map that is centered on the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay.
Which, at that time was considered to be the known world.
Right.
So it depicted the land masses as these circular shapes surrounding the sea. And then you've got the ocean forming a ring around the outer edge of that.
So a simplified view, but still a huge leap forward.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of understanding geography. But we were talking about the Apeiron and, this idea of constant change. So how does that relate to Anaximander's map making?
Yeah, well, that's where it gets really fascinating. Because you see, even though the map was this static representation, it represented a world that he believed was in constant flux. He even proposed that the Earth was a sphere, which was a really radical concept for his time.
Wow. So he was thinking way outside the box, both in terms of the universe and the Earth itself. But how did he reconcile the idea of a spherical Earth with a circular map?
Well, unfortunately, no original maps by Anaximander have survived.
Oh.
What we know about it comes from later accounts and reconstructions. So it's a little bit hard to say for sure how he represented these ideas visually, but it's likely that his map was more of a symbolic representation of the world, reflecting his philosophical understanding of its dynamic nature.
So even though the map was just a two-dimensional, representation, it was pointing toward a deeper, more complex understanding of what the Earth actually was.
Yeah, exactly. And, it underscores this connection between his scientific curiosity and his philosophical insights.
Yeah.
He wasn't just mapping the world as he saw it. He was really trying to understand these underlying principles that governed its form and its place in the cosmos.
Okay, so we've got this amazing map, this revolutionary concept of the Earth. We've got the Apeiron, this primordial source of everything. I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. But I have to admit, the Apeiron is still a bit abstract for me. How does it actually work? Like, how do things actually emerge from this unlimited source?
So Anaximander believed that the Apeiron was in constant motion.
Okay.
So imagine like a cosmic vortex that's just swirling, constantly generating this energy. And from that motion, opposites arise.
Oh, interesting.
So you've got hot and cold, you've got wet and dry, light and dark. These opposites kind of separate out from the Apeiron, and they interact with each other, creating the diversity and complexity of the world that we see.
So it's not just a random explosion of stuff. There's a pattern. There's a logic to how things are emerging.
Precisely. And this process is driven by this interplay of opposites, which is something that you actually see in other philosophical and spiritual traditions.
Right.
You think about the yin and yang in Taoism, for example.
Right, yeah.
It's all about this balance of opposites.
So it seems like he was really onto something fundamental, something that goes beyond the specifics of his time and culture. But if the Apeiron is constantly generating these opposites, wouldn't the universe just keep expanding infinitely?
Well, that's where the idea of cosmic justice comes back into play.
Okay.
So remember, he believed that everything that emerges from the Apeiron must eventually return to it.
Okay.
So it's a cycle of creation and destruction, a balancing act that ensures the overall stability of the cosmos.
So it's not just a one-way street. There's a give and take.
Yeah.
Like a cosmic reciprocity.
Exactly. As things kind of emerge and interact, they're borrowing from this Apeiron, but eventually that debt comes due.
Oh, wow.
They have to pay it back by dissolving back into the source. It's like a cosmic loan.
That's a great analogy. And it really, I think, gets at the heart of this idea that everything's interconnected and that we're subject to this universal law of balance.
Yeah, it's a profound insight.
Yeah.
And, it really challenges us to think about the consequences of our actions, not just in our own lives, but in the grand scheme of the cosmos.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about the Apeiron. We've been talking about the map. But you mentioned earlier that Anaximander's concept of time was cyclical and that it was linked to the Apeiron and this idea of emergence and return. So how does that compare to other views of time that were going around in ancient Greece?
Yeah, well, there were other philosophers who saw time differently.
Yeah, didn't some of them see it as like a linear progression?
Exactly. So think about Heraclitus. He's famous for his saying, everything flows like a river.
Oh, right.
So he believed in this constant change. It's an unstoppable kind of process of becoming.
Okay.
So for him, time was like a river, you know? It's constantly flowing forward, no real beginning or end, just this continuous movement.
So for Heraclitus, time was all about movement, all about change, but not necessarily cyclical.
Exactly. He saw it as linear, always moving forward,
Right.
never really repeating itself. And that's obviously a very different concept from Anaximander's cyclical view,
Right.
where everything eventually returns to the Apeiron.
It's amazing to think that, these different ideas about time were already being debated over 2,500 years ago.
I know.
I mean, it just shows how deeply these early thinkers were really wrestling with these fundamental mysteries of existence,
Yeah, absolutely.
But it seems like Anaximander's view, with its emphasis on cycles and balance, really resonates with a lot of modern thinking today.
Oh, yeah. His ideas really do seem to resonate with a lot of concerns that we have today, you know, like about sustainability, about the interconnectedness of all things, the need to find balance in a world that often feels chaotic and out of control.
It's like he was kind of anticipating some of the key challenges that we face today.
Yeah.
Urging us to consider the long-term consequences of our actions and to recognize our place within this larger web of life.
Yeah.
But how did Anaximander's ideas influence later thinkers? Like, did his work actually have a lasting impact on philosophy and science?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, his ideas were incredibly influential. Of course, it's hard to trace a direct line, to specific thinkers, and especially during certain periods like the Middle Ages,
Right.
where, some other philosophers were more dominant.
Right.
But the concept of this primordial, undefined source, like the Apeiron,
Yeah.
it kind of pops up again and again.
Oh, really?
You can see echoes of it in various philosophical and theological systems.
So even if they weren't directly citing him, like, those seeds were planted.
Yeah,
And they continue to sort of sprout in different forms.
exactly.
That's fascinating.
And then, by the time you get to the modern era, there's this resurgence of interest in pre-Socratic philosophy. And so thinkers like Nietzsche and Whitehead,
Oh, wow.
who were really grappling with these big questions about time, space, the nature of reality, they found a lot to admire in Anaximander's work.
So he really was ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But if you had to, boil down his legacy to one thing,
Yeah.
what would you say is, his most important contribution?
I think it's his commitment to asking those big questions and his courage to really challenge conventional thinking. He wasn't afraid to explore new ideas, even if they seemed really radical or counterintuitive at the time.
He was a real pioneer, not just in terms of his discoveries, but, his approach to knowledge.
Yeah.
He just really embodied that, that spirit of inquiry, that exploration that, drives all great thinkers and innovators.
Absolutely. Yeah. He teaches us that, the pursuit of knowledge, it's a journey. It's
Yeah.
not a destination. It's about being open to new perspectives,
Right.
challenging assumptions,
Yeah.
and just constantly seeking a deeper understanding of the world and our place in it.
So what can we, we've learned all this great stuff about Anaximander.
Yeah.
So what do we do with it? How do we apply it to our own lives?
Well, I think if you go back to that idea of the Apeiron, it's not just this abstract philosophical concept.
Yeah.
It's this reminder that everything is connected,
Okay.
that change is a constant,
Yeah.
and that there is this kind of underlying cosmic balance at play.
Right.
And this awareness can help us navigate the complexities of life,
Yeah.
with the sense of perspective and purpose.
So next time I'm feeling stressed out, overwhelmed by, everything that's going on,
Yeah,
I can just think about the Apeiron.
exactly.
Okay, there's this unlimited source of potential out there.
Yeah, that underlies everything. Even in the midst of all this change and uncertainty, there's this deeper order at work.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think this has been a real eye-opener for me.
Yeah, me too.
It's made me appreciate just the power of philosophical inquiry and the enduring relevance of ancient wisdom.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been great exploring all these ideas with you.
Likewise. I hope it inspires you to continue asking those big questions and, to embrace the apeiron within yourself.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. We all have that potential within us, that capacity for growth and change and connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go out there and explore the infinite possibilities.
Yeah, and never stop questioning and exploring and just seeking a deeper understanding of the world around us.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Anaximander.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those big questions.